The bell over the cafe door chimed like a small silver coin striking marble. I looked up from the espresso machine and saw them. A man in a charcoal suit, sharp as a fresh blade, and a girl, thin as a willow branch, walking one careful step behind him. He was the kind of man people recognized even if they claimed they didn't care for wealth. Mr. Ashervale. Real estate. Hotels. Headlines. A millionaire many times over. His watch never flashed, it glowed. His shoes didn't squeak, they whispered. The girl, maybe 12, wore a pale blue dress and a cardigan too big for her, like someone had tried to wrap her in safety and ran out of fabric. Her hair was tied in 2 low braids. Her eyes held the glassy quiet of lakes at dawn. She moved as if the air might shatter if she pushed it too fast. They sat in the corner by the window. Sunlight spilled across the table, painting everything with a soft gold. But she didn't look outside. She watched her hands. She pressed her thumbs together, then apart, then together again. A rhythm only she could hear. "Your best tea," Mr. Vale said, voice smooth, eyes already on his phone. "Not too hot." "For the young lady?" I asked. He nodded without looking up. "She won't say if it's wrong." A muscle jumped in my jaw, quietly angry for a stranger. I chose the jasmine pearls. A gentle tea. It opens slowly, unfolds like good news. I warmed the pot, rinsed the cups, and let the first pour breathe. The steam rose and fogged my glasses. I wiped them with the corner of my apron and carried the tray over. The girl glanced at me, then at the pot, then at the pale little cup. Her gaze rested on the tea the way a bird rests on a wire. Ready to fly, ready to fall. "This one smells like flowers," I said softly. "Like a garden after rain." She blinked. No words, only those lake-still eyes. And a tiny breath. Mr. Vale didn't look up. "Thank you." I set the cup in front of her. The porcelain made the faintest tick against the saucer. She placed her hands around it and closed her eyes. The way one holds a prayer. The way one holds a secret. "Careful," I whispered. She lifted the cup. Steam touched her face. Her mouth parted. And then she did something so small it almost disappeared. She leaned in and took one sip. The cafe hummed. Spoons chimed. Milk frothed. Outside, a bus exhaled at the curb. Inside her little cup, a ripple widened and went still. Her throat moved. Once. Twice. She set the cup down with both hands. Her fingers trembled. Not fear. More like a memory waking up. Her lips pressed together, then softened. Her eyes filled, slowly, like the tide coming in. She lifted her right hand and tapped her finger on the table. 1, 2, 3, then a pause. Then 1. Then 2. A pattern. A knock only she knew. "Lila," Mr. Vale said, finally glancing up. "You all right?" She didn't answer. She pressed a palm to her throat. The world became a low hum. I swear the light itself listened. In that golden corner, the air turned delicate, like sugar threads on a pastry. She traced a small circle in the fog on the window. A lily. Then another. 2 lilies side by side. My chest tightened. Something was happening that words would ruin. So I stood, quiet. So did the sunshine. Even the espresso machine held its breath. She looked at me again. This time her gaze didn't slide away. It held. Her mouth formed a shape I knew well. The shape people make before they say thank you. Before they say please. Before they say a name. The bell over the door chimed again. Laughter gusted in, a gust from a street. It broke the spell. She flinched. Mr. Vale's eyes sharpened. He leaned forward. "Lila." Her fingers started tapping again. 1, 2, 3, pause, 1, 2. I didn't understand the code, but I felt the plea inside it. The room felt balanced on a hair. One breath could tilt it. "Would you like honey?" I asked, voice barely there. She nodded. Small. Brave. I reached for the honey. The sunlight slid along the glass. As I turned back, I saw it, the tiniest quiver of sound gathering behind her lips. A quiver like a bird readying its first note. And then I wondered, what happens after a single sip, when a silence has lived in a throat for years? She opened her mouth, And the sound that came wasn't a word, it was a memory. They started coming every afternoon. Always the same time. The quiet hour when the city sighs and the cafe glows like a warm pocket in a cold coat. Sometimes it was just them. Sometimes 2 bodyguards waited outside with earpieces and pressed suits like shadows that learned to stand. But inside it was the 3 of us. A barista, a powerful man who didn't know how to hold tenderness without crushing it, and a girl who kept a whole ocean of words behind her ribs. We learned each other's language in small ways. I learned that her name was Lila because of the way he said it when his voice softened by accident. He learned that she preferred the cup with the hairline crack along the rim because she held it longer. And she learned that I would always give her honey last, so she had a moment to decide. On the 2nd day, I added orange blossom to the jasmine. On the 3rd, a hint of mint. On the 4th, a thin slice of pear because I thought of sweetness that doesn't show off. Each time, she took 1 sip and pressed her palm to her throat. Each time, her eyes turned glass bright. And each time, the sound came back, that first fragile note of a bird not ready to land. I looked for clues in the way she drew lilies on glass. Always 2. 1 larger, 1 smaller. Sometimes she inked a tiny dot above the smaller lily, like a star. I started to wonder about a mother. The cardigan that was too big. Was it hers? The braids, whose hands had learned that pattern first. After a week, the city found out. Phones lifted when they walked by. A blogger wrote about the silent heiress in the corner cafe. And the story spun out like cotton candy, sweet, empty, irresistible. People came to gawk. They ordered drinks they didn't want and sat too long. They tried to stare without staring. Mr. Vale hated it. I watched him swallow anger like stones. He wanted to be a wall. But walls can't hold water. They only make it find cracks. She hasn't spoken since the fire, he said once, low, not looking at me, as if telling the sugar jar. For years, 8 months, and 6 days. Silence crawled under the table and lay down at her feet. A house. I asked. He nodded. Country place. She was 7. I was in New York closing a deal. The nanny he stopped. His jaw set. Grief found his collar and tugged. My wife, he swallowed. Lila made it out. Smoke. Shock. Doctors say sometimes the body shuts the door to keep the storm out. I nodded. My mother called it the hush. The heart puts a finger to its lips. Shoo. Later we'll talk. Later, when it's safe. I brought the tea, hot and slow, with honey waiting in a tiny glass spoon. Lila's fingers hovered over the cup. She looked at me, then at her father. Then she did something new. She tapped the table. 1, 2, pause, 3, pause, 1. And then she leaned forward and took her sip. The room leaned with her. If sound were cloth, this would have been velvet, thick, soft, swallowing echoes. A whisper came. Barely there. No letters yet. Just the soft rustle a dress makes when someone stands too quickly. She pressed her hand to her throat, eyes wide, surprised by her own courage. A tear slid down and didn't fall. It clung to her jaw like a tiny crystal holding on. You're safe, I said. Take your time. Mr. Vale stared at the cup as if it held the map back to his daughter. He was trying so hard not to scare the moment away. He clenched his hands under the table where she couldn't see. Knuckles white. Nails moons. Outside, the light dimmed. Storm clouds bunched together like whispered plans. May I asked, pointing at the window. She nodded. I drew 2 lilies again. Then a third, smaller still. Lila put her hand over mine and moved my finger, adding a tiny dot above the smallest bloom. Her fingers were cool, careful. She looked up at me, then at her father. Her lips shaped something. Slow. Soundless. But I could read it. Mama. A gust hit the window. Rain tapped the glass. Inside, her breath changed. It came shallow, then deeper. She pressed her palm to the cup as if to borrow its heat. Lila, her father whispered, dropping his voice until it was almost a plea. Baby. She closed her eyes. The whisper rose again. This time it wasn't just a rustle. It had a direction, a beginning, a wish. She parted her lips. The bell over the door crashed loud as thunder. Two paparazzi stumbled in with wet cameras and wider eyes. A flash burst white. Lila flinched so hard the cup tipped and spilled. Hot tea ran across the table like a small river breaking its banks. Her father rose. The bodyguard swung in. The room broke into shouts, apologies, rain, and camera shutters. And Lila. She stood so suddenly her chair fell back, and in the chaos, one syllable fled her throat, wild and untrained and aching to live. It sounded like Ma, before the cameras nearly drowned it. The storm knocked out half the block. Power flickered, failed, and left the cafe in a soft blue dusk lit by streetlight and the memory of sun. Phones turned into little moons. The espresso machine died mid-sigh. Somewhere, a car alarm tried to find its courage and gave up. We locked the door. I flipped the sign to closed, heart pounding. The paparazzi were gone, shoved back out into the rain by bodyguards who moved like doors. But the damage was done. The moment had scattered like a flock of birds. "I'm sorry," I said, wiping tea with a cloth. The table smelled like jasmine and heat. Lila stood still, hands at her sides, eyes wide as if sound itself were a wild animal we'd scared off. "It's not your fault," Mr. Vale said, sharper than he meant. He scrubbed his face with both palms, then lowered them. "It's mine. It's always mine." He paced while thunder rolled. He was a man made of straight lines who had been shoved into a circle. I lit 3 little candles. Their flames were humble, brave. The cafe softened. Shadows stretched and yawned. Rain stitched silver threads down the glass. Lila's breath was too fast. I recognized that edge. The cliff of panic. The body preparing to run without moving. "Here," I said, picking up the honey. "We'll play a game." She frowned, curious, beating back fear by 1 small inch. I dipped the honey spoon and made a tiny heart on the wooden table. Sticky, golden, shining in candlelight. Then I added 2 tiny dots above it. She leaned closer, eyebrows lifting. "It's a bee," I said, "or a heart with freckles. Your choice." Her lips twitched. Almost a smile. Her fingers reached out and hovered, not touching. Respectful of small beauty. "Now you draw," I whispered. She took the spoon. Hands trembling. Carefully. She drew a little lily beside my silly bee. Then a smaller one. Then a dot above the small bloom. The way she always did. She looked at me, eyes asking a question without words. "Do you want to tell me something?" I asked. She nodded. A small, decisive dip of chin. In candlelight, the tear track on her face was a silver thread. She pressed her palm to her throat. Her father stopped pacing. The room leaned in again. "Slow," I said, "like a soft door." She opened her mouth. A scrape of sound. Rough. Brave. A coal raked across stone and somehow making light. She tried. The consonant caught, fluttered, broke. Her father swallowed a sob and turned it into a cough. "It's okay," I said. "Try the breath first. Like blowing out the candle, but gentle." She breathed. In. Out. The candle flame trembled, but didn't die. She looked at it, then at me, then at her father. He stood so still even his grief didn't dare move. Outside, thunder growled farther away. The storm had said what it needed and was walking off. "May Ma," she pushed again a little louder. The sound cracked thin and sweet like ice in spring. I saw something then. A memory brushed her face. Not the fire itself, but a kitchen morning. A kettle singing. A woman's laugh. 2 lilies pressed between wax paper and slipped into a cookbook. The past is not a place, it's a scent. It's steam fogging a window you didn't know you were still standing behind. She took the spoon again. In the honey, she drew a house. A rectangle, a little triangle roof. Then a square window. In the window, a circle. A face. She tapped it. 1, 2, pause, 3. Tap, tap, tap. I counted under my breath. Then she added a tiny flame over the roof. 1 small lick, hardly more than a tooth. Her father's breath left him like a man punched in the stomach. He pressed his fist to his mouth. He didn't cry. He held the flood at the dam. "You were there," I whispered. At the window. She nodded, slowly, then shook her head, then nodded again. The mind's own stutter step. Did you see someone that night? I asked. Someone who helped? Or someone who didn't? Her gaze cut to her father and back to me. She lifted the spoon and drew a stick figure near the house. She gave it a hat. Then she crossed it out. Hard. Mr. Vale took one step forward. Lila who? She didn't look at him. She looked at me, and in candlelight, her eyes were two deep questions. Her mouth opened. Air turned thin. The flame shivered. And then she spoke. Not a full word. Not yet. But a sound that had a soul in it. It sounded like a name, one you'll recognize when the lights turn back on. The power returned with a sigh, lights blinking awake like startled birds. The candles suddenly looked small and unnecessary, but they had already done their sacred work. The espresso machine hummed, brave again. The rain had thinned to a silver veil. Lila's lips were still parted. The sound she'd loosed floated in the air, too delicate to land. Say it again, I said gently. We'll catch it this time. She tried. The consonant was softer now, worn by effort into a shape the mouth could hold. M. Her eyes slid to the window, to the lilies we'd traced, now blurred by moisture. Her fingers found the edge of a cracked cup she loved. She clung to it like a handrail on a staircase in the dark. She winced, surprised by the second letter. It surprised us too. Not mother. Not mama. Something else. She gathered herself and tried again. Mar. Her father's face changed. Not with anger. With recognition. Fear, old and well-fed, woke up behind his eyes. He shook his head once, like a man trying to dislodge a dream that bit back. Marshall, Lila whispered, the word fragile and valiant, a moth flying straight through flame. Silence struck the room like a tuning fork. Mr. Vale's jaw locked. No, she flinched. He wasn't loud, but the word carried a lifetime of orders. I stepped between the force of his voice and the tremble of her courage. Who is Marshall, Mr. Vale? He stood still. Then he sat. It was a small surrender. He stared at the honey drawings, now glossing over with tea and time. My driver, he said at last. He was with my wife that night. He drove them up. Rain, wind, a fallen tree, he said. He ran to get help. The nanny panicked. The fire. I wasn't there. He had said that sentence so many times it was all edges. Lila shook her head. She drew the little house again. Quick now. The window. The circle face. The flame. The stick figure with a hat. Then she drew another stick figure, smaller, near the door. She gave that one 2 braids. Then Lila tapped the figure with the hat and drew a line from it to the window. Marshall went to the window. I said, translating. She nodded, eyes bright, urgent. To help. I asked. She hesitated. Then she drew a tiny rectangle in the hat figure's hand. A phone? A lighter? She paused, thinking. She added a $sign on it. A chill walked up my spine. He took something, I whispered. Her father's hands curled. This is absurd. She lifted her face. Courage was making a home behind her ribs. She reached for the cup, took a small sip, closed her eyes. When she opened them, there was a different kind of light there. A child's light that has met the dark and decided, stubbornly, to be a match. Her voice came softer, but steadier. Marshall. She swallowed. Key. A single word. Whole. Crooked. Beautiful. Her father reeled, like the air had moved beneath him. Key. She nodded hard. Tap. 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 The rhythm of truth fighting to be heard. She swiped the honey to make a door shape and drew a keyhole. Then she slid the honey spoon into it and turned. Click. I saw a scene assemble itself in her eyes. A locked office at the country house. Important files. Insurance. A will. Numbers. A secret. The driver backlit by flame and greed. A choice made in smoke. The door chimed. Not the front door, our side door, the one staff used. It popped open on a gust. And there he was, dripping on the mat, hat in hand. Marshall. In the flesh. He'd come with the bodyguards earlier and must have waited outside in the rain, loyal as a dog, or patient as a wolf. His gaze landed on Lila, then on the table, then on Mr. Vale. He smiled the wrong smile, thin, polite, practiced. "Sir," he said, "car's ready whenever you are. Streets are a mess." Lila went still, but the match inside her didn't go out. She pointed to him, a small, shaking finger. "Do you have something to tell me, Marshall?" Mr. Vale asked, voice low, blade smooth. Marshall didn't blink. "About what, sir?" "About a key," I said. He shrugged, casual. "Keys are part of the job." The room held its breath, since it already believed him yesterday, and didn't know how not to today. "Lila," I whispered, "if you can, say the rest." She stood. She was only 12. She was also a lighthouse. Her lips shaped around the stubborn sounds. Her voice climbed up through the torn places and didn't ask permission. "He left her," she said, each word stepping out barefoot onto broken glass. "Mama. To take papers." Her father's face broke. Not like glass. Like ground. Cracked open by a seed of truth finally given water. Marshall's smile thinned to a wire. "She's confused," he said. "Trauma." And in that moment, the millionaire's daughter, who hadn't built a sentence in 4 years, took a breath that reached down to the soles of her small shoes and found what she needed. "No," she said. Clear. Bright. Small. Immense. Her next word would decide whether a man walked out or a lifetime of lies did. Everything slowed. The rain, the second hand on the wall clock, even the steam rising from the forgotten kettle, as if time wanted to hear a child finish her sentence. "No," Lila repeated louder now. "He took E." She lifted the honey spoon like a wand and pointed at Marshall's pocket. Not the obvious one. The inside breast. The kind of pocket where you keep things you shouldn't have. A muscle jumped in his jaw. He reached up, too late, to adjust his jacket. It looked casual. It wasn't. "Empty it," Mr. Vale said, voice low, the kind of low you don't mistake for gentle. Marshall held still. His eyes did the small math liars do. Could he talk his way past a child's first full sentence in years? Could he drown it in technicalities, throw it into adult deep water? He touched the pocket, then thought better of it. The bodyguards stepped forward. Rain ticked the glass like a watch counting down. Marshall sighed, a man trying on innocence one last time. He slid out a leather card case. A spare key fob. A folded paper that looked nothing like a menu and everything like a map. He laid them down. Lila stared. She shook her head. "Not those." "Other," she whispered. He hesitated. Something in him flicked to mean. It was a flash, quick and sharp, like a knife deciding it had been a spoon too long. "She's a child," he said. "And sick." Lila lifted her chin. "I saw," she said, the words finding each other like hands in the dark. "Fire. Window. You took E." Mama called. "You look. You run." Her father closed his eyes. His hands, those deal-making hands, opened and emptied. "Please," he said, and the word was new in his mouth. He looked at Marshall. "Please." Something softened. Or maybe something snapped. Marshall reached into the lining of his jacket, seam pocket, thief pocket, and pulled out a small brass key on a cheap ring. Old. Ordinary. Forever. He set it down between the honeybee and the lily. The cafe did not cheer. It exhaled. The truth sat there glinting, humble as an apology. "I meant to return it," he said. "Things were chaotic." "And the papers?" I asked. He looked at the folded map. It wasn't a map. It was a copy of a life insurance policy. 2 signatures. One nearly washed out by water. One crisp as a blade. Numbers like storms. "I kept them safe," he said. "For 4 years." I asked. He didn't answer. The bodyguards moved. They weren't cops. But they knew the kind of phone call to make. Marshall didn't resist. He didn't confess either. He just stood there, a man who had traded a woman's last minutes for a pocket full of power he would never learn how to spend. When they let him out, Lila swayed. The match inside had burned bright. Now it was ash and heat and a trembling that had nothing to do with fear. "Sit," I said, pulling up the chair that had fallen earlier. I righted it with a soft scrape. She sank down. I fixed the cracked cup. I brewed new tea. Jasmine again. Simple. True. She watched the steam rise. The cafe smelled like rain and something clean, like forgiveness talking to a floor that had seen everything. Her father knelt beside her. Not in polished perfection. In grief. In awe. In a father finally small enough to be held by the truth. "I'm sorry," he whispered, forehead to the edge of the table. "I'm so sorry. For not being there. For not hearing you sooner. For making my voice a wall." Lila touched his hair. It was a gesture even older than language. He shook with quiet sobs he'd been too strong to carry standing up. "Daddy," she said, and the word was a bird that had finally found its tree. He cried openly then. Not like a headline. Like a man. He turned his face and pressed his lips to her hand. He stayed there a long time. He didn't try to fix the moment. He let it fix him. "I brought the honey." I set it down. She didn't draw. She simply lifted the cup, took one sip, and closed her eyes. When she opened them, she looked at me. "Thank you," she said, each letter soft as a petal and heavy as a door unlocking. "You did it," I said. "You opened the hush." She smiled, small and real. Tea helped. We laughed. It sounded like spoons chiming in a sink after closing. Honest. Tired. Light. Days later, there were more doors, lawyers, detectives, statements. The key opened a box in the country house. Inside, papers that did what truth always does. They changed the shape of a family. There was no miracle. Only work. Only healing. Only a father learning to sit at the same table as his daughter and ask about lilies. Lila still isn't a chatterbox. She keeps words like jewels, and when she spends one, it shines. Sometimes she doesn't speak for an hour. Sometimes she says a sentence that stays with you for a week. Birds don't sing all day. They choose the dawn. They come to the cafe on quiet afternoons. She takes one sip. She draws 2 lilies on the window. Sometimes 3. And once, she drew a 4th with a dot above it. A future. And when new people stare, when phones lift, when curiosity forgets its manners, I clear my throat, and the room remembers it is a living room, not a stage. Because I was there the day a child's whisper grew legs and walked out into the world. It didn't roar. It didn't need to. It only told the truth. And the truth was enough. Final reflection for viewers. When someone finally finds their voice, do we make space to listen, or do we rush to speak for them? What moment in your life taught you to hear the quiet things?